Our next guest is three-time Grammy Award-winning artist Lecrae. You've probably heard his music, but what you might not know is that Lecrae is an entrepreneur and an investor himself. As the co-founder of Reach Records, he is more than capable to speak into the role of risk and creativity in the life of an entrepreneur, and so that's exactly, of course, what he's here to do. Lecrae, thank you very much for being with us today. I want to jump right in. One of the marks of a faith-driven entrepreneur is being called to create. We believe that we feel God's pleasure when we're creating, so love to hear your riff on your experience about how you see God working in the creative process, and what does that look like for you, and what's it like being an entrepreneur in the music business?
Great questions. I think, creativity is really a very unique aspect of expressing, what the theologians would call imago Dei, or made in the image of God. God is the ultimate creator. So he is the source of all creativity. He created the heaven, the earth, the moon, and the stars. And so when you are creating, you're actually reflecting his glory. You're reflecting back the awesomeness that he has instilled upon you. Ephesians 2 tells us that we're God's workmanship, created for the things that he's pre-planned. And so when I create, I know that in some senses I'm walking in God's footsteps. And then the other beauty of creating is obviously God creates something out of nothing. So he can take nothing and make something. We use the raw materials that God has created to make things as well, following his example. But one cool thing that we get to do that no other creature on the planet can do is that we get to add value to things by creating them. So we can take ore and metal and then shape it and mold it, and then we add value to it in the same way God took dirt and added value to it by breathing life into it. So I think that's something really special that I don't want to take for granted, is that, man, when people hear a song that I've made and they see it as valuable enough to want to purchase it, then I've followed in the footsteps of God, because I've just taken sounds and thoughts and added value to them. And that is a beautiful aspect of being a creative. And then as far as being in the music industry is concerned, I think that obviously entertainment is an unusual space, unlike other industries where you're creating a product. I think a lot of times in entertainment, you are the product in some senses. And so you've got to learn how to disconnect yourself from the very thing that you're creating, and not see it as necessarily an extension of who you are. So yes, I did create this song. You don't have to like it. That doesn't mean you don't like me, or I shouldn't take it personal. Mm-hmm. And one thing that my partner Ben have always said from inception is that we're not in the music business, we're in the people business. And so if you see individuals as valuable, then you create for them. You don't think about how can I just make something and get over on people so they'll buy it. You imagine the person on the other end of this product that you've created and how they will appreciate it and how it will affect them. And you'll always win every time.
That's really interesting. A lot of times faith-driven entrepreneurs will talk about the importance of loving their customers and retaining their customers. But I've never thought of artists creating something like a song or a movie or something that consciously, intentionally helps them to think about the audience. You see something like that at Chick-fil-A where they're talking about delighting the customer, but that's super cool to see that idea as a principle in your music.
Absolutely. You're not making widgets and gadgets. You're creating an experience, and I think as believers, we should get that more than anybody else. If Apple is doing a phenomenal job of creating a user experience that thinks about the end user, how much more design thinking should we take into place if we're called to love each other, if we're called to consider one another as better than ourselves? I think that user experience is a part of loving people. It's a part of saying, man, I want to bless you with hospitality, with graciousness, with love, with care, and with quality.
Yeah, why is it important that people know that you're a great artist, not just a great Christian artist? Is the adjective Christian something you think might be in need of redeeming? And what's your take on that?
That's good. I think it's not a hill that I would die on. There probably was a time in my life when I would have, but it's not a hill that I would die on. I do think that Christian makes a phenomenal noun a subpar adjective. So when you say I am a Christian, you're saying a lot about who you are, and you stand for Jesus and you're a follower of Jesus. I think when we use now an adjective Christian, it's so loose. What does that exactly mean? So if I say I sell Christian water, what exactly does that mean when you say that? If you say, now it'd be awesome if I said I'm a Christian plumber or a Christian investor, and you instantly knew that I operated with quality, excellence, integrity, timeliness. That would be awesome if, like, whatever came after the adjective Christian meant that. But oftentimes it doesn't. And that should be the case. And so first and foremost, I need you to know that I'm here to create quality work. I'm here to create not at a subpar level, because I know that typically what we tend to do is we'll say, as long as it is Christian or bears the Christian message, we can deal with subpar quality. And I think that's a tragedy for us in society. So that would be my prayer. I think it's amazing when I find out on the back end that someone who does a phenomenal job at whatever it is that I'm wanting is a believer. It's like, okay, wow, one for the home team, because you did my taxes phenomenally, accountant. You know what I mean? And I, you come to value that and appreciate that, but it's tough when that's not the case.
That's a great word. Let's talk now about your new book that you've got coming out in just a few weeks, I Am Restored. Talk to us about it. What's that all about?
Yeah, I'm restored. How I lost my religion and gained my faith. I think, the best way I could sum it up is that oftentimes, as your Christian leaders, especially, they find themselves fighting to keep up the image, fighting to keep up the persona of all the things that a Christian leader is supposed to have. And what ends up happening for them is that there's probably too much shame to be vulnerable and transparent about the areas where they are not succeeding and are not winning, because there's so many expectations of them. And that is religiosity. That's religion to the core, is when you're performing for acceptance. That's not faith. Faith is when you can be honest and transparent and say, God, I don't have what it takes. I need you to do it because I don't have what it takes. So this book is about me coming to the conclusion that I was more devoted to my devotion to God than I was devoted to his devotion to me. You know what I mean? And that's really what it's about. It's about understanding how devoted to God, how devoted to you God is. And out of a response to that, you find yourself devoted to him. But oftentimes we like to pat ourselves on the back for look at me. I woke up at 5 a.m., coffee, Bible study. I'm doing great. And then when you struggle, everyone looks at you and says, well, you're the 5 a.m. Bible study coffee guy. Like, you're not allowed to struggle. You're not allowed to have, to fall, to fail. And I think that's sad. Even Apostle Paul talks about how he's the chief of sinners. He tried over and over again to count himself. I count nothing I've done I count it all as a loss. He tried to place himself in a humble position to say, I'm so dependent on God that I cannot brag on myself. And I think that's the position that I want people to see. And I want people to feel that freedom of restoration. Yeah.
One thing that not a lot of people might know is a partnership that you have with Ben Washer that helped build Reach Records. We've already recorded a podcast with both of you before that will be releasing soon, but I'd love to talk to you about that a bit. I'm passionate about the idea of co-founders. You see this in the Bible when Jesus sent the disciples out into twos, and it's something that's so core to my personal journey. I wouldn't be who I am today without my business partners. What are some of the lessons that you've learned and some encouragement you could offer up about working and creating in partnership?
Yeah, I mean, if you, I'm talking to Christians out there, and if you go to the ancient Jewish roots of our faith, Jesus told his disciples that in Hebrew, they're called Talmudim, and he told them to go off in Havarim. And what that is pairs, to go off in pairs, not to do it alone. As a matter of fact, when they would study the scriptures, they would study it as a team in groups or pairs, to bounce ideas and thoughts off of each other, because oftentimes we can be blinded by our own perception of how things should be. And so you can fool yourself quite often, but working in partnership gives you the opportunity to wrestle with ideas, to wrestle with your own ideas. It gives you a sense of accountability for things that, are not wise. And so it offers you the opportunity to grow in ways. It's just like being married. Single people think they're awesome, and then they get exposed as soon as they get married that they're not as awesome as they thought they were, because now someone else has to see all of the areas that you weren't able to see. And I think that's the beauty of partnership, is you can see some of the areas and faults that you may have. And then lastly, I would just say, what you're doing ultimately in terms of partnership or teamwork is you're allowing yourself to take God serious when he tells us to trust one another, when he tells us to depend on one another, and also when he tells us that we in and of ourselves don't have all that it takes. You begin to appreciate the gifts that other people have. And I love staffing my weaknesses. If you know you're weak in some areas, you can staff them. And that's been a phenomenal journey for myself and the partnerships that I've experienced.
That's a great reminder. All right, I'm supposed to be wrapping it up, but I've got one last question for you. And this is off script, so you don't have to go there if you don't want. But I remember asking J.D. Greear and saying, hey man, when is somebody going to do a sermon series about faith-driven entrepreneurship? It's never been done before. Are you up for it? And so that evolved in us making this 8-part video series with Right Now Media. But now I've got something to ask you. When is somebody going to do a song about faith-driven entrepreneurship?
I've got some thoughts, actually. You know what I mean? So I do have some thoughts. I've thrown out a couple gems here or there, you know what I mean, that people may not have caught. I may have to expound on them. I remember one thing I said, I knew a guy who made some money and he bought 5 chains, but he should have used his money to buy 5 chains, like franchises. Oh man, see.
You're right, I did miss that. All right, that's awesome, I love it. Until you release an entire album, I'm gonna hold on to that. But Lecrae, thank you so much for joining us. So grateful for this time together. We appreciate all that you've done to share.
Appreciate y'all. Much love.